Hey, so tonight we're gonna dive into what dating was like in the Victorian era, and trust me, if you think modern dating is complicated with all the apps and mixed signals, wait until you hear about the maze of etiquette books, chaperones, and social rules that governed every single interaction between men and women in the 1850s. We're talking about a time when even making eye contact had rules, when a lifted hat was basically a text message, and when receiving a gift from the wrong person could ruin your reputation forever. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Alright, find that cozy spot, take a nice slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to 1855 London, and trust me, you're gonna be real grateful for that mattress by the time we're done. The Victorians had a saying about making love, but it didn't mean what you think. Making love back then meant courtship, the art of wooing someone properly. And if you wanted to survive the Victorian dating scene, you better know the rules. So, congratulations, you just woke up in May of 1855, right in the heart of London. But not the London you know. This is Queen Victoria's London, where coal smoke hangs thick as fog in the morning air, where horse hooves clatter against cobblestones outside your window, and where the smell... Oh, the smell is something else entirely. The Thames River down the street carries all the waste from 2.5 million people, and on warm days like today, that scent drifts right through your bedroom window. Your nose wrinkles involuntarily as you pull the heavy wool blankets up to your chin. The good news is you're 22 years old and from a respectable middle-class family. Your father owns a small but successful haberdashery shop, which means you've got enough money for decent clothes and food, but not enough to be completely idle. The bad news? You're a woman in 1855, which means your entire future hinges on one thing: finding a suitable husband. And the rules for doing that are about as complicated as learning to waltz while juggling teacups. You stretch your legs under the rough cotton sheets, feeling the weight of the heavy quilt pressing down on your chest. There's no central heating in this house, won't be invented for decades, so every morning starts with the bone-deep chill that seeps through the stone walls. Your housemaid, Mary, has already been up since 5 o'clock lighting the coal fires downstairs, and you can hear her heavy footsteps on the wooden stairs as she carries the coal scuttle up to start the fire in your bedroom grate. That scuttle weighs about 30 pounds when it's full, and she'll carry dozens of them up and down these stairs before the day is done. The bedroom door creaks open and Mary slips in, her arms straining with the weight of the coal. Her hands are already black with soot, and you notice the way she favours her left shoulder, probably strained from all that lifting. She kneels by your fireplace and you watch her skilled hands arrange the kindling and coal with quick, practiced movements. The first spark catches, then spreads, and soon there's a small orange glow pushing back against the morning cold. "Good morning, miss," Mary says, wiping her sooty hands on her apron. "Your mother says you're to dress properly today. The Weatherbees are calling this afternoon and they're bringing their son." Your stomach does a little flip. The Weatherbees. You've heard about their son, Thomas, 26 years old, recently returned from India, where he worked as a clerk for the East India Company. Your mother has been hinting about this visit for weeks, and you know exactly what it means. This isn't just a social call, this is an inspection. You sit up in bed, feeling the cool air hit your shoulders through your cotton nightgown. The fire is already making the room warmer, but it'll be another hour before the chill really leaves. You watch Mary move around the room, laying out your clothes for the day. Not just any clothes, your best day dress, the one made of dark blue wool with tiny mother-of-pearl buttons that took your mother 3 months to save up for. Mary, you say, your voice still rough with sleep, what do you know about the Weatherby son? She glances toward the door, then leans closer. Well, miss, I heard tell from their housemaid that he's got all his teeth, which is more than can be said for most gentlemen his age, and she says he doesn't drink over much, though he does have a fondness for cigars. She pauses, arranging your corset on the bed. Course, he's been in India these past 4 years, so he might have picked up some strange ideas about things. The corset, you look at it with resignation. Every morning Mary will lace you into this contraption of whale bones and cotton that squeezes your ribs until you can barely breathe properly. It's designed to give you that perfect hourglass silhouette that's fashionable right now, but it also means you'll spend the entire day feeling like someone's got their hands wrapped around your waist, squeezing gently but persistently. You swing your legs out of bed and your bare feet hit the cold wooden floor. The floorboards are wide planks of oak, polished smooth by decades of use, and they're always cold no matter how warm the fire gets. You stand up and Mary immediately starts unlacing your nightgown. This is normal. Privacy, as you know, it doesn't really exist for women. Mary has seen you naked thousands of times, and she'll continue to dress and undress you until you marry, at which point your husband's valet or your own lady's maid will take over. The chemise goes on first, a thin cotton undergarment that feels like wearing a tea towel, then the corset. Mary positions it around your waist and starts pulling the laces tight. With each tug, your breathing gets a little more shallow. By the time she's finished, you're taking small, careful breaths from the top of your lungs. Deep breathing is literally impossible in this thing. Not too tight, Mary, you manage to say, though you both know it's already as loose as fashion will allow. Course not, miss. Your mother specifically said you should be able to speak clearly when the gentleman calls. Next come the layers. First, a bustle pad that ties around your waist, essentially a small pillow that pushes your skirt out behind you in the fashionable bell shape. Then petticoats. 3 of them, each one adding bulk and weight. By the time Mary drops your dress over your head, you're wearing about 15 pounds of fabric, and that's before we even get to the shoes. The shoes are kid leather, soft and buttery to the touch, but completely flat. Heels won't become fashionable for another few decades. They button up the side with tiny pearl buttons that Mary fastens with a special hook. Your feet, encased in cotton stockings, feel secure, but not particularly comfortable. These shoes weren't made for walking long distances. They were made for sitting in parlours and taking short, graceful steps. While Mary pins your hair into the elaborate style that's currently fashionable, parted severely in the middle, then swept back into a low chignon with carefully arranged curls framing your face, you think about what this afternoon might bring. The Weatherby visit is essentially a job interview, except the job is wife, and the interview involves sitting in your family's front parlour making polite conversation while both sets of parents watch every word, every gesture, every expression. If Thomas Weatherby finds you suitable, he might ask your father for permission to call on you. If your father agrees, then begins the formal courtship process, which could last anywhere from a few weeks to several months. During this time, you'll never be alone with him. Every conversation will happen under the watchful eye of a chaperone, usually your mother or your maiden aunt Caroline, who lives with your family and has strong opinions about everything. Mary finishes with your hair and steps back to examine her work. You look at yourself in the small hand mirror on your dressing table. The face staring back at you is pale, fashionably so, since tanned skin means you work outdoors like a servant. Your lips are their natural colour, since makeup is considered improper for unmarried ladies. Your eyebrows are your own, dark and well-shaped. The overall effect is meant to suggest innocence, modesty, and good breeding. "You look lovely, miss," Mary says, and you can tell she means it. "Now, shall I bring up your breakfast?" Breakfast arrives on a tray: porridge with a small amount of cream, toast with butter, and tea that's strong enough to strip paint. The porridge is filling but bland. The toast is actually quite good. The bread was baked fresh this morning by the cook, and the tea is exactly what you need to wake up fully. You eat carefully, mindful of your tight corset and the fact that any spill will show on your dark dress. After breakfast, your mother appears in your doorway. At 45, she's still an attractive woman, though the years of childbearing and constant worry about money have etched fine lines around her eyes. She's wearing her second best dress, dark brown wool with black trim, and her hair is arranged in a style similar to yours, but more severe. "Good morning, dear," she says, stepping into your room and closing the door behind her. "We need to have a little talk before this afternoon." You set down your teacup and give her your full attention. These little talks usually contain important information. "Now you know why the Weatherbees are coming," she begins, settling herself on the edge of your bed. "Thomas needs a wife and you need a husband. It's a practical arrangement, but that doesn't mean it can't be a pleasant one if you both conduct yourselves properly." She pauses, smoothing her skirt. "I've been corresponding with Mrs. Weatherby, and she's told me some things about her son that you should know. He's well educated, he has prospects for advancement in his company, and he's saved a considerable amount of money during his time in India. He's also, according to his mother, eager to settle down and start a family." You nod, though your stomach is doing nervous little flips. Starting a family, that's a polite way of referring to the physical aspects of marriage that no one ever discusses directly, but that hover over every courtship like a shadow. "Now, there are some rules you absolutely must follow this afternoon," your mother continues. "First, you must not accept any gifts from him, no matter how small. A gentleman should not be giving gifts to a lady he's not engaged to, and accepting them suggests that you're encouraging his attentions inappropriately." This is straight from the etiquette books that your mother reads religiously. The Young Lady's Friend, published in 1837, specifically warns that one gift will lead to another and encouragement to offer their hearts to you. Second, you must not touch him in any way. No shaking hands unless he's formally introduced by your father, and even then, keep it brief. If he offers you his arm, you may take it lightly, but otherwise, keep your hands folded in your lap. You think about how strange this must seem to young people today, where casual touching is so normal. But in 1855, physical contact between unmarried people is serious business. Even engaged couples are limited to holding hands and perhaps exchanging chaste kisses, always under supervision. Third, let him lead the conversation, but don't be afraid to show intelligence. He's been educated, so he'll appreciate a woman who can discuss something beyond the weather, but don't contradict him directly, even if you disagree. Find gentle ways to express different viewpoints. This is a delicate balance. Too much intelligence and you risk being seen as unfeminine or threatening. Too little and you might appear boring or stupid. You've been practicing this balancing act your entire life. "Finally," your mother says, reaching over to adjust a curl near your ear. "Remember that he's assessing you as much as you're assessing him. Watch how he treats the servants, how he speaks to your father, how he responds when things don't go exactly as planned. These small things will tell you much more about his character than his polite parlor conversation." She stands up, brushing imaginary lint from her skirt. "The Weatherbys will arrive at 3 o'clock precisely. We'll serve tea and the small cakes that Cook made yesterday. You'll sit on the settee near the window. The light is flattering there, and I'll sit in the chair nearby. Your father will join us after he's spoken with Mr. Weatherby about business matters." After your mother leaves, you find yourself with several hours to fill before the afternoon's performance. You walk downstairs to the family's small library, really just a room with 2 bookcases and a window seat, and select a volume of poetry. It's socially acceptable for young ladies to read poetry, though novels are still considered somewhat questionable. You settle into the window seat and try to concentrate on the verses, but your mind keeps wandering to the afternoon ahead. The house around you is coming to life. You can hear Cook banging pots in the kitchen as she prepares the midday meal. The housemaid is sweeping the front steps, a job that has to be done twice daily because of all the coal smoke and horse droppings in the street. Your father is in his study, going over the shop's account books. The house smells of coal fire, beeswax polish, and the lavender water your mother uses to freshen the linens. Through the window, you watch the street outside. A milk cart rolls by, the driver calling out his wares in a voice that carries clearly through the glass. 2 ladies walk past, their skirts swaying with each step, their arms linked as they chat. They're both wearing the same style of dress as you. Dark colours, full skirts, tight bodices, but you can tell from the quality of their fabric that they come from wealthier families. Behind them walks their maid, carrying their parcels and staying a respectful distance behind. A gentleman on horseback trots past, sitting straight in his saddle, his top hat perfectly positioned. He's wearing a dark coat with tails and light-coloured trousers, the standard daytime outfit for men of his class. As he passes your window, he touches the brim of his hat in a polite greeting, even though he doesn't know you. This is normal. Gentlemen are expected to acknowledge ladies, even strangers, with this small gesture of respect. The morning passes slowly. You read a few poems, help your mother arrange flowers for the front parlour, and practice a piece on the pianoforte. Playing music is one of the accomplishments expected of young ladies, along with speaking a little French, doing needlework, and being able to sketch passably well. You're not expected to be brilliant at any of these things, just competent enough to demonstrate that you've had a proper education. Lunch is a simple affair. Cold meat, bread, cheese, and pickled vegetables. You eat lightly, partly because your corset makes large meals uncomfortable, and partly because you're too nervous to have much appetite. Your mother chatters about neighbours and local gossip, but you can tell she's nervous too. A good marriage for you would solve several of the family's financial concerns and secure your future. No pressure. At 2:30, your mother declares it's time for final preparations. You go upstairs to check your appearance one more time. Mary has laid out fresh gloves, white cotton ones that button at the wrist, and your small locket, the only jewellery considered appropriate for an unmarried lady receiving visitors. The locket contains a miniature portrait of your grandmother, and it rests just below the high neckline of your dress. You practice sitting down gracefully, which is more challenging than it sounds when you're wearing all these layers. The trick is to lower yourself slowly, letting your skirt settle around you in an attractive arrangement, then fold your hands in your lap. Getting up requires pushing down on the arms of the chair and rising smoothly without showing any of the effort involved. At 10 minutes before 3, you're stationed in the front parlour, sitting on the settee as instructed. Your mother sits nearby in her chair, needlework in her lap to give her hands something to do. Your father stands by the fireplace, checking his pocket watch every few minutes. The room smells of beeswax and the fresh flowers your mother arranged this morning. Late afternoon sunlight streams through the windows, and you hope it's as flattering as your mother promised. The clock on the mantel ticks toward 3 o'clock. Each second feels longer than the last. Your palms are slightly damp inside your gloves, and you resist the urge to fidget with your skirt. This is it, the beginning of what could be the rest of your life. At exactly 3 o'clock, there's a firm knock at the front door. Your father opens the front door, and you hear the low murmur of male voices in the entrance hall. Formal greetings, the rustle of coats being removed, the sharp tap of walking sticks being placed in the umbrella stand, then footsteps approaching the parlour, and your heart hammers against the rigid stays of your corset. Mr. Weatherby enters first. Thomas's father, a distinguished gentleman with silver whiskers and a slight stoop that suggests hours bent over account books. Behind him comes Mrs. Weatherby, a round woman in burgundy silk whose jewellery catches the afternoon light. And finally, Thomas himself steps through the doorway. He's taller than you expected, with brown hair parted precisely down the middle and mutton chop whiskers that frame a lean face. His skin has a golden undertone that speaks of his years in the Indian sun, and when he moves, there's a careful precision to his gestures that suggests military training. He's wearing a black frock coat that reaches his knees, grey trousers, and a white shirt with a high collar that looks like it might strangle him if he turns his head too quickly. Mr. and Mrs. Weatherby, your father says formally, may I present my wife, Mrs. Hartwell, and my daughter, Miss Eleanor Hartwell. You rise from the settee, slowly, gracefully, letting your skirt settle around you as you've practiced 1,000 times. You offer a small curtsy, just a dip of your knees and a slight incline of your head. Too deep would suggest you're of lower status, too shallow would appear disrespectful. Miss Hartwell, Mrs. Weatherby says warmly, what a pleasure to finally meet you. Thomas has been quite eager for this introduction. Thomas steps forward and offers a brief bow. Miss Hartwell, his voice is deeper than you expected, with just a hint of an accent you can't quite place, perhaps picked up during his time overseas. Mr. Weatherby, you reply, meeting his eyes briefly before lowering your gaze. Direct eye contact is acceptable for the initial greeting, but prolonged staring would be considered brazen. Everyone settles into their assigned positions, like actors taking their marks on a stage. Thomas sits in the chair across from you, close enough for conversation, but far enough to maintain propriety. The parents arrange themselves as subtle chaperones, present, but attempting to appear absorbed in their own discussion about mutual acquaintances and local news. I trust your journey from India was pleasant, you venture, since it's acceptable for ladies to ask about travel. Indeed, though rather lengthy, Thomas replies. 3 months aboard ship provides ample time for reflection. I found myself quite ready to return to English soil and English society. He pauses, and you catch something in his tone, perhaps relief, perhaps something else. The climate there can be challenging for those of us unaccustomed to such intensity. You nod sympathetically, though you've never been farther from London than Brighton. I imagine the heat must be quite overwhelming. We complain when our summers reach 70 degrees. Quite so. In Bombay, we often saw temperatures above 100 degrees, with humidity that made the very air feel thick as soup. He shifts in his chair, and you notice how he unconsciously loosens his collar just slightly. I confess I developed a great appreciation for English rain during my time away. This draws a small smile from you, a genuine one, not the practiced parlour smile your mother taught you. Rain is certainly something we have in abundance. The conversation continues in this careful dance. Thomas tells you about the markets in Bombay, the exotic fruits he learned to enjoy, the challenge of managing clerks who spoke a dozen different languages. You share your own much smaller experiences, the books you've been reading, the music you've been practicing, your observations about life in London. Each topic is safe, appropriate, designed to reveal character without venturing into anything too personal. But you're also watching him, as your mother advised. When Mary enters to serve tea, you notice how Thomas nods politely to her, a small acknowledgement that many gentlemen of his class wouldn't bother with. When your father makes a joke about the weather, Thomas laughs, not the forced chuckle of social obligation, but genuine amusement that reaches his eyes. When Mrs. Weatherby accidentally knocks over her teacup, sending hot liquid splashing across the small table, Thomas immediately rises to help, producing a clean handkerchief without being asked. "Oh, how clumsy of me," Mrs. Weatherby flutters, dabbing at the spill. "Not at all," your mother soothes, while Mary quickly appears with a cloth to clean up the mess. These things happen. But you've noticed something else. When the teacup clattered to the floor, Thomas flinched. Not just a normal, startled response, but something deeper. His hands tensed for just a moment, and his eyes darted toward the door as if assessing an exit route. It lasted only seconds before he regained his composure, but you filed the observation away. Something about sudden loud noises affects him more than it should. The formal portion of the visit lasts exactly 1 hour, as etiquette demands. Any shorter would suggest disinterest, any longer would be presumptuous. As the Weatherbys prepare to leave, Thomas requests a brief word with your father, a conversation that takes place in the hallway, just out of earshot, but visible to everyone in the parlour. Through the doorway, you watch your father nod several times. Thomas gestures occasionally as he speaks, his hands moving with that same careful precision you noticed earlier. After perhaps 5 minutes, they shake hands, and your father's expression suggests the conversation went well. "Miss Hartwell," Thomas says, returning to the parlour. "With your father's permission, I would be honoured to call on you again, perhaps Sunday afternoon, if that would be agreeable." Your heart does a little skip. This is it, the formal beginning of courtship. That would be very pleasant, Mr. Weatherby. After they leave, your mother immediately begins the post-visit analysis. "Well, he seems quite respectable," she says, settling back into her chair. "Good posture, clean fingernails, polite to the servants. And did you notice how he helped when I spilled the tea? Shows consideration." Your father joins the discussion. He's saved quite a respectable sum during his time in India, he reports, enough to establish a household without requiring assistance from either family, and his prospects with the company appear sound. But you're thinking about that moment when the teacup fell, about the careful way Thomas moved, about the slight tightness around his eyes when he spoke of the challenging climate in India. There are layers here that the formal courtship process isn't designed to reveal. Sunday arrives with unseasonable warmth for late May. You're dressed in your second best gown, pale green cotton with tiny white flowers, a colour that your mother says brings out your eyes. This time there's no corset crisis, no nervous breakfast. You're beginning to understand the rhythm of these visits. Thomas arrives precisely at 2 o'clock carrying a small bouquet of flowers, acceptable because flowers are temporary and modest, unlike jewellery or books which might suggest too serious an intent. He's dressed more casually today in a brown coat and lighter trousers, and he seems more relaxed. "Miss Hartwell," he says, offering the flowers with a slight bow. "I noticed these growing in my mother's garden and thought you might enjoy them." They're sweet peas, delicate purple and white blossoms that smell like springtime and innocence. As you take them, your gloved fingers brush his for just an instant, and you feel a small electric shock that has nothing to do with static from your wool dress. "They're lovely," you say, burying your face in the fragrant petals to hide the flush you feel rising in your cheeks. "Sweet peas are my favourites." "I hoped they might be," he says, and there's something in his tone that suggests this choice wasn't as casual as he made it seem. This visit feels different from the first. With the initial formalities out of the way, the conversation flows more naturally. Thomas tells you about his childhood, growing up as the youngest of 4 sons, always trying to prove himself worthy of attention. You share stories about your education, the small school you attended where you learned French and drawing and enough mathematics to manage household accounts. "I confess," Thomas says during a lull in the conversation, "I find London quite overwhelming after 4 years in smaller communities. The noise, the crowds, the pace of everything. Sometimes I wonder if I've forgotten how to be properly English." There's a vulnerability in this admission that surprises you. Gentlemen aren't supposed to express uncertainty or weakness, yet here he is, acknowledging that the transition home hasn't been as smooth as expected. "Perhaps," you say carefully, "it's not about being properly English, but about finding your own way of being English. 4 years is a long time. You've had experiences that most of us can't imagine." He looks at you with something approaching surprise, as if he hadn't expected such understanding. "You're very perceptive, Miss Hartwell." Over the following weeks, Sunday visits become routine. Thomas calls every Sunday at 2 o'clock, staying for exactly the prescribed hour. Sometimes you sit in the parlour, sometimes you walk in the small garden behind your house, always with your mother or Aunt Caroline within sight. The conversations grow deeper, more personal, though still bounded by the limits of propriety. You learn that Thomas has nightmares sometimes. He mentions this obliquely when explaining why he often looks tired on Monday mornings. You discover that he writes poetry, though he's too embarrassed to share any with you. He tells you about the strange foods he learned to enjoy in India, the festivals he witnessed, the complexity of managing business relationships across cultural divides. In return, you share your own carefully guarded thoughts, your frustration with the limits placed on women's education, your secret ambition to travel, to see places beyond London's sooty borders, your love of novels, though you're careful not to mention the more scandalous ones you borrow from your friend Catherine. During your 4th Sunday visit, Thomas makes a request that sends your pulse racing. "Miss Hartwell," he says, glancing toward where your mother sits with her needlework, "I wonder if you might consent to accompany me to the exhibition at the Crystal Palace next Saturday, with proper chaperonage naturally. This is significant. Attending a public event together represents a new level of courtship, a semi-public declaration that you're officially keeping company." Your mother's needle pauses in her embroidery as she waits for your response. I would be delighted, you say, trying to keep your voice steady despite the flutter of excitement in your chest. The Crystal Palace, rebuilt in South London after the Great Exhibition of 1851, represents everything modern and exciting about this Victorian age. The building itself is a marvel of iron and glass, rising from Sydenham Hill like a fairy tale palace made of light and air. Inside, there are gardens, fountains, exhibits from around the world, and enough wonders to fill days of exploration. Saturday arrives bright and clear. You're dressed in your absolute best, a dress of deep blue silk that took your mother 6 months to save for, with a matching jacket and a small hat adorned with ribbons. Your gloves are pristine white kid leather, and you carry a small beaded reticule that contains your handkerchief, smelling salts, and a few coins. Thomas arrives with a hired carriage, an open landau that will allow for proper supervision while providing the adventure of travelling together. Aunt Caroline, selected as chaperone for her stern demeanour and eagle eyes, settles herself in the facing seat. She's wearing her most forbidding expression and her sharpest hat, the one with the feathers that seem to point accusingly at anyone who might consider impropriety. The drive through London is an adventure in itself. The streets teem with traffic, carriages, omnibuses, carts and riders on horseback, all competing for space on roads that were never designed for such volume. Street vendors call out their wares: fresh flowers, penny a bunch, hot pies, meat pies, sweep your chimneys, soot away. Thomas points out landmarks as you pass them. The new Houses of Parliament with their Gothic towers, Westminster Abbey with its ancient stones blackened by coal smoke, the bridges spanning the Thames where barges heavy with goods wait their turn at the docks. The river itself is thick with traffic. Steamboats belching black smoke, sailing ships with their forest of masts, and the constant parade of smaller craft ferrying people and goods across the murky water. As you travel south of the river, the character of the neighbourhoods changes. Gone are the grand squares and elegant terraces of central London. Here the houses are smaller, crowded closer together, and the air smells of industrial smoke mixed with something less pleasant. The kind of smell that comes from too many people living in too small a space with inadequate sanitation. But then you climb Sydenham Hill and suddenly the Crystal Palace rises before you like something from a dream. The enormous structure catches the afternoon light and throws it back in 1,000 brilliant sparkles. Gardens stretch in all directions, filled with exotic plants and elaborate flower beds that form intricate patterns when viewed from the palace's elevated terraces. It's magnificent, you breathe, forgetting for a moment to be properly reserved. Indeed it is, Thomas agrees, offering you his arm as you step down from the carriage. Though I confess it reminds me a bit of some of the palaces I saw in India, this Victorian confidence in iron and glass and human ingenuity. Inside the palace, you're immediately overwhelmed by the scale and variety of everything. The central nave stretches seemingly forever, filled with fountains and exotic plants that tower overhead. There are exhibits on every conceivable subject, the latest industrial machinery, collections of butterflies from around the world, displays of native crafts from the far reaches of the British Empire, and artistic installations that blend science with beauty. Thomas guides you through the crowds with careful attention to your comfort. When the press of people becomes too thick, he steers you toward quieter alcoves. When you pause to examine a particularly interesting display, he waits patiently without hurrying you along. When Aunt Caroline declares herself in need of refreshment, he immediately locates a tea room where she can rest her feet. It's during this respite, while Aunt Caroline is occupied with her tea and scones, that Thomas leans slightly closer and speaks in a voice only you can hear. "Miss Hartwell, I hope you won't think me presumptuous, but I find myself growing quite attached to these Saturday excursions and to your company." Your heart stops, then starts again at double speed. This is approaching the territory of declarations, of serious intent. You glance quickly at Aunt Caroline, but she's absorbed in her methodical destruction of a currant scone. "I have enjoyed them as well," you say quietly, your voice barely above a whisper. "I had hoped," he begins, then stops himself. "That is, I wonder if you might consider, but perhaps this is not the proper venue for such discussions." You understand perfectly. He's testing the waters, approaching the question of engagement without actually asking it yet. According to all the rules, such conversations should happen first with your father, then with you, and certainly not in a public tea room with your aunt 3 feet away. "Perhaps," you say carefully, "such discussions might be more appropriately held in a more private setting." The look that passes between you carries enough electricity to power the palace's new gas lights. He understands that you're not rejecting his implied suit, merely suggesting proper protocol, relief and something deeper. Anticipation, affection flicker across his features. The rest of the afternoon passes in a happy blur. You admire tropical birds whose feathers shimmer with colours that have no names. You watch demonstrations of new photographic techniques that can capture a person's image in mere minutes rather than hours. You sample exotic fruits whose flavours transport you briefly to distant countries you'll likely never see. But underneath all the wonder and excitement, there's a deeper current running between you and Thomas, a sense of approaching change, of decisions that will reshape your entire future. By the time you return home as the sun sets over London's smoky skyline, you know that everything is about to shift. Tuesday evening arrives with a thunderstorm that rattles the windows and sends sheets of rain hammering against the glass. You're in the parlour with your mother, working on embroidery by lamplight when the front doorbell rings. It's past 8 o'clock, far too late for social calls. So when Mary appears in the doorway looking flustered, you know something significant is happening. "Begging your pardon, ma'am," Mary says to your mother, "but Mr. Thomas Weatherby is at the door, says he needs to speak with the master urgently." Your mother's eyebrows rise nearly to her hairline. Your father appears from his study, newspaper still in hand, looking equally puzzled. Through the parlour window you can see Thomas's hired carriage waiting in the rain, the horse stamping impatiently as water streams from its mane. "Show him into the study," your father says after a moment's consideration. "Eleanor, you and your mother remain here." But of course you strain to hear every sound from across the hall. The murmur of male voices, serious and low, your father's occasional "indeed," and Thomas's longer responses that you can't quite make out. The conversation lasts nearly 20 minutes, an eternity when you're sitting with your embroidery hoop forgotten in your lap, your heart beating fast enough to make the cameo brooch on your collar tremble. Finally, footsteps approach the parlour. Your father enters alone, but his expression gives everything away before he speaks. "Eleanor," he says, and there's satisfaction in his voice mixed with something that might be relief. "Mr. Weatherby has asked for permission to pay his addresses to you. I have given my consent." The embroidery hoop slides from your nerveless fingers and hits the floor with a soft thud. This is it. Thomas wants to marry you. After 6 weeks of careful courtship, he's ready to make it official. He wishes to speak with you tomorrow afternoon, your father continues. "I told him to call at 2 o'clock. Your mother will be present, naturally, but he'll be permitted to make his proposal directly to you. Your mother lets out a little squeak of excitement that she immediately tries to suppress. "Oh, Eleanor, we must decide what you'll wear, and we should have cook prepare something special, and perhaps we should move the good china from the cabinet to—" "Mother," you interrupt gently, though your own excitement is making your hands shake slightly. "Perhaps we should see what he has to say first." But you already know what Thomas will say. The question isn't whether he'll propose, it's whether you're truly ready to accept him. Marriage in 1855 isn't like stepping into a relationship you can leave if things don't work out. Once you say yes, your legal existence essentially disappears. Your property becomes his property, your money becomes his money. Even your children, if you have them, belong legally to him rather than to you. Yet, what choice do you really have? At 22, you're already approaching the age where people will start whispering about you being on the shelf. Your family can't afford to support you indefinitely, and Thomas seems kind, intelligent, and genuinely fond of you. In a world where many marriages are purely business arrangements, the prospect of affection feels like tremendous good fortune. Wednesday crawls by with agonizing slowness. You change clothes 3 times before settling on a dress of soft grey wool with violet trim, serious enough to show you understand the gravity of the occasion, but pretty enough to remind Thomas why he's proposing in the first place. Your hair refuses to cooperate, and Mary has to pin and repin the complicated braided style twice before it stays properly. At precisely 2 o'clock, Thomas arrives carrying a small velvet box that makes your stomach perform acrobatics. He's wearing his best black coat and a fresh white shirt with a collar so stiff it looks like it might cut his throat if he turns his head wrong. His hands are shaking just slightly as he removes his gloves. "Miss Hartwell," he says formally, though his eyes are warm. "Mrs. Hartwell." He nods to your mother, who has positioned herself in the corner chair with her needlework, close enough to supervise, but far enough to provide the illusion of privacy. You sit on the edge of the settee, your back straight, your hands folded in your lap. Thomas takes the chair across from you, the same arrangement as those first visits, but now everything feels different, electric, final. "Miss Hartwell," Thomas begins, then stops and takes a deep breath. "Eleanor, if I may, I have spoken with your father, and with your permission, I would like to speak directly to your heart. This is the moment when everything changes." You nod, not trusting your voice. "These past weeks of knowing you have been among the happiest of my life," he continues, his voice gaining confidence. "Your intelligence, your kindness, your strength of character, all of these qualities have made me realize that I cannot imagine my future without you in it." He slides from his chair to one knee beside the settee, the velvet box now openly displayed in his hands. "Eleanor Hartwell, would you do me the tremendous honor of becoming my wife?" The ring inside the box is modest but beautiful, a small diamond surrounded by tiny pearls set in yellow gold. It's not flashy or ostentatious, but it's clearly been chosen with care and represents a significant expense for a man in Thomas's position. "Yes," you whisper, then find your voice. "Yes, Thomas, I would be honored to accept." His relief is so obvious that you almost laugh. He takes your left hand in his, the first time you've touched without gloves, and slides the ring onto your 4th finger. His hands are warm and slightly rough, probably from his years overseas, and the touch sends a little shiver up your arm. "There," he says softly. "Now it's official." From her corner, your mother makes a small sound that might be a suppressed sob of happiness. When you look over, she's dabbing at her eyes with her handkerchief while trying to appear absorbed in her embroidery. The rest of the visit passes in a blur of practical discussions. The engagement will be announced in next Sunday's paper. The wedding will take place in 6 months, giving you time to prepare a trousseau and Thomas time to secure appropriate housing. He's found a small house in Kensington, 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen and a tiny garden that will be available to rent come autumn. I know it's not grand, Thomas says, his voice slightly apologetic, but it's respectable and it's near enough to my office that I can walk to work in good weather. It sounds perfect, you assure him, and you mean it. The idea of having your own household, your own space to arrange as you please, feels like the most luxurious thing imaginable. After Thomas leaves, your mother immediately begins what she calls engagement planning. Lists appear overnight. What needs to be purchased, what needs to be sewn, which relatives need to be informed. The next few months will be a whirlwind of preparation unlike anything you've experienced. But first, there are the immediate changes that come with being officially engaged. Starting the very next Sunday, Thomas is permitted to take you on unchaperoned walks. The first time you step out together without your mother trailing behind feels like the most daring thing you've ever done. You walk slowly through the small park near your house, your hand resting lightly on Thomas's arm, marveling at this new freedom. For the first time in your courtship, you can speak without measuring every word for its appropriateness under parental supervision. I confess, Thomas says, as you pause beside a fountain where children are sailing toy boats. I've been terrified for weeks that you might refuse me. Were you really? You ask, surprised. But surely you could tell that I enjoyed your visits. Enjoyed them, yes, but enjoyment and willingness to marry are quite different things. He adjusts his grip on his walking stick. I know I'm not the most exciting prospect. No title, no great fortune, and I come with some complications from my time abroad. You think about those moments when loud noises made him flinch, about the careful way he sometimes held himself as if expecting pain. Everyone has complications, Thomas. The important thing is whether 2 people can face them together. He stops walking and looks at you with an expression you can't quite read. You're very wise for someone so young. I'm not that young, you protest. 22 is quite grown up. Of course it is, he says quickly. I didn't mean to suggest, that is, I sometimes feel much older than my 26 years. India has a way of aging a person. Over the following weeks, these unchaperoned walks become precious to both of you. Away from the formal constraints of parlour visits, Thomas begins to reveal more of himself. He tells you about the fever that nearly killed him during his 2nd year in Bombay, about the colleague who cheated him out of a promotion, about the overwhelming relief he felt when the ship carrying him home finally cleared the harbour. You share your own secrets in return. Your fear that you're not naturally maternal enough to be a good mother, your frustration with the limitations placed on women's education, your secret dream of learning to paint with real skill, not just the watercolour dabbling considered appropriate for ladies. Perhaps, Thomas suggests one afternoon as you sit on a bench watching sparrows hop around your feet, you could take proper painting lessons after we're married. We won't be wealthy, but we should be comfortable enough for small luxuries. The casual way he says after we're married makes your stomach flutter. It's becoming real, this future you're planning together. Along with the walks come other new privileges. Thomas is now permitted to visit you in the front parlour without formal supervision, though he's still required to leave before nightfall. During these visits, you're allowed to hold hands, a simple intimacy that feels revolutionary after months of careful distance. The first time Thomas takes your hand in yours, you're sitting on the settee looking through a book of engravings he's brought to show you scenes from India. His fingers intertwine with yours, warm and slightly calloused, and you're amazed by how natural it feels. "Is this proper?" you ask, though you make no move to pull away. "Perfectly proper for an engaged couple," he assures you. "Though I admit it feels rather scandalous after all those weeks of keeping my hands to myself." You laugh, and the sound seems to surprise both of you. It's been a long time since you've laughed freely in Thomas's presence. Most of your interactions have been so careful, so measured, but engagement has brought a new ease to your relationship. The letters start arriving the very week of your engagement. According to Victorian tradition, engaged couples are expected to write to each other regularly, especially when separated by business or family obligations. Thomas's work requires him to travel to the company's offices in Manchester for a week, and suddenly you're learning to express your feelings on paper. "My dear Eleanor," his first letter begins, "I have been gone only 2 days, yet I find myself missing our conversations more than I anticipated. Manchester is a busy city, full of the noise and smoke of industry, but I confess I would trade all its bustling energy for another quiet walk through your neighbourhood park." You spend an entire evening crafting your response, filling 3 pages with your own careful handwriting. You tell him about the books you're reading, the changes your mother is making to the house in preparation for the wedding, the small daily details that seem meaningful when shared with someone who cares about them. These letters become the foundation of your deepening relationship. In writing